Well, well, hello everybody. So good to see you. This is a hard sell on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful Saturday night after a very, very harsh winter, for sure. Um, this is going to distract me.
Another double.
My name is Ruben Cash, and I am the environmental coordinator here at Skagway Traditional Council. I no longer live here in Skagway. I live down in Port Townsend with my wife. We're being close to our folks as they get into their golden years. But I still manage the environmental department from afar. And you may have noticed that I'm holding this little microphone here, and that's for everybody who's online and who's going to be listening to this later on as a recording. So just a little plug for Sunday. I don't think that you'll be here on Sunday, but that's okay. Anyone who's listening to this recording or is live, maybe you want to join us back here at Skagway Traditional Council, the Tribal Community Center at 5 p.m. tomorrow to talk about general bear safety. And then we're all going to take a little crawl down to Bruco for burger night, and Isabel's going to set up and do a little less formal meet and greet, answer all of your burning questions, because this is a very important subject here for Skagway, right? We in Skagway, like many other parts of the world, live in bear country. And they eat, they sleep, and yes, they poop along us. So many Western people see bears as a hazard, right? A dangerous animal with lethal potential. Well, it's true, we should never underestimate a bear's ability to fiercely protect its personal space and offspring. Bears are also an integral part of the ecosystem and many other systems. Tlingit and other indigenous peoples don't view bears the same way that we Westerners tend to. And I found this out the hard way by exhibiting some very Western thoughts at an all Tlingit video call. And I was quickly reminded that bears are family. Indigenous people don't view bears as dangerous. They're family. They're drawn from the same dust as us. They breathe the same air. They're eating the same chains of molecules, and they're not managed in indigenous cultures as a hazard, but they're rather engaged with like a cousin. And so I would encourage anyone who's listening to this to adopt the same kind of relationship, have respect for the power of our furry cousins, but instead of fearing the potential violent outcomes, take time to understand how they live, why they decide to do berry things, and particularly pay attention to what they don't like, because that's when things get dangerous. And so we have a very special guest this afternoon, all the way from Los Anchorage. I'd like to introduce Isabel Grant, Alaska representative for the Defenders of Wildlife. Isabel is here to expand your understanding of bears and offer some tools and resources that facilitate life in bear country. So let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you. I feel like as being the only in-person attendee, you should get some kind of prize. I have a lot of stickers. All right. Thank you for that introduction. I love the part about bears being cousins. And I'm going to touch a little bit on bears' role in the environment as well as part of this. But like the title says, talking about how to build relationships with bears in our communities and how to be proactive about living safely with them, preventing harm to bears and preventing harm to ourselves and our communities. So a little roadmap for the day. I'm going to briefly introduce Defenders of Wildlife, the organization that I work for, and then talk a little bit more about relevant bear biology and their role in the environment, and then dive into human-bear conflict before talking about how we can prevent conflict, and specifically talking about electric fencing and then a Defenders Electric Fence Incentive Program. So to start, Defenders of Wildlife is a national nonprofit organization that's based in Washington, D.C., and they have field offices all over the country, and I work for the Alaska field office, which is based in Anchorage, so there's about 5 of us over there. And Defenders' mission is to protect all native plants and animals in their natural communities, and the organization envisions a future where where diverse wildlife populations are secure and thriving in a landscape with healthy lands and waters. And so we see human-wildlife coexistence as integral to that mission and to our vision. Defenders' bear coexistence work is located in the lower 48 and expanded to the Kenai Peninsula in 2019 before expanding again to Southeast Alaska in 2022. And then just this year, we expanded again to cover the Anchorage area and Kodiak Island. So we're covering a larger area, very excited about it. And then these maps that you see show our program areas, as well as those little pins are all of the locations of past electric fencing projects. So a little bit about bears, some relevant biology for you. Brown and black bears are both called opportunistic omnivores. And so this means that they consume a wide range of foods based on what is available in their home ranges, as well as what's available in those ranges seasonally. So bears don't have territories, they don't defend territories, they occupy these home ranges, and they'll actually share those ranges with bears of both sexes and even bears of other species. In general, brown bears consume plants, roots, fruits, nuts, insects, small mammals, and then larger prey like caribou and moose calves when those are available. And of course, salmon is a big food source for them. And black bears feed on pretty much the same thing: grasses, berries, nuts, insects, and grubs. Again, those caribou and moose calves, and particularly salmon, especially in Southeast Alaska. Bears with access to salmon are typically larger than their inland counterparts, and that's because salmon are so nutrient and calorie rich. And calories are really important for bears because building fat reserves is essential to their survival and their reproduction throughout the winter. And so during their awake period, they are highly food motivated. They have an incredible sense of smell, which allows them to seek out and find food all throughout their ranges. And fall in particular is a really critical foraging period for bears because it immediately precedes their typical denning period. So they enter a state known as hyperphagia, and which allows them to eat almost double their typical calorie intake in a day. And so when natural foods are scarce, it could be during that fall season or during any of their awake periods, bears are going to be motivated to travel further distances in search of food and even seek out alternative food sources. And that can lead them to come into our communities. And if they find food, they're going to remember those locations because they're very intelligent, and they're going to return in the future. And female cubs can teach their young to do things like break into chicken coops, into garbage cans, and really just perpetuate that cycle. And so if people aren't prepared for the possibility that at any kind of point in time, a bear may shift its behavior and its direction and move into a human community in search of food, that's when we create these opportunities for conflict when we're not prepared for that. So before I go further into conflict, I want to go back into bears and their environment. So bears are primarily known by a lot of people as seed dispersers, and they are excellent seed dispersers. They're particularly good at dispersing devil's club berries. In fact, one study suggests that they may be a more significant disperser of devil's club berry seeds than even birds. Of course, also they're known for dispersing blueberries, salmon berries, and a host of other berries. This dispersal helps to increase biodiversity, and the seeds in their scat also provide food for small mammals. But bears are also part of a fascinating and significant relationship between themselves, salmon, and the forests. So like I said before, salmon are a very nutrient and energy-rich food source. And in times of salmon abundance and shallower streams, when bears catch that salmon, they may only eat about 25% of the fish, prioritizing the most nutrient-rich part, discarding the rest and moving on to try to catch another one, kind of trying to cycle through, get as many nutrients as quickly as possible. What they don't eat, they leave behind to be eaten by scavengers or decompose on the shoreline. They may also take their catch deeper into the forest to avoid it being stolen by other bears. And so what isn't eaten by the bear is then consumed by scavengers, and there are over 80 species that rely on bear-provided salmon carcasses. And they further distribute these carcasses around what we call the riparian area, or the area adjacent to the stream side. And what isn't eaten decomposes, and it's going to enrich that soil with nutrients, especially in nitrogen and phosphorus, which are very key for tree and plant growth. That bolstered vegetation then provides habitat for not only bears, but also for other species. And it's going to help to regulate the stream temperature, providing shade and preventing erosion, giving salmon cool, healthy waters to migrate through. So just some more reasons why we want to not only have healthy, stable, persistent bear populations around us, but also why we want bears to continue eating their natural foods and not consuming the human-provided foods. So switching gears into conflicts, human-bear conflicts are often described as urban, recreational, or agricultural. So some examples of urban conflicts include bears breaking into garbage cans, getting into sheds, cars, or even houses in search of food, while agricultural conflicts are going to include getting into beehives, feeding from gardens and orchards and composts, or killing or attempting to kill livestock and poultry. And then recreational conflicts will include more things like accessing food from campgrounds and picnic areas, stealing from unattended backpacks and tents, or surprise encounters on the trail. So for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to focus mainly on urban and agricultural conflicts, but I will mention a couple resources pertaining to recreational conflicts. For more information about recreational conflicts, I would join tomorrow night for the bear safety presentation at 5 p.m. in the same location. So just to reiterate, again, these are all images of what we would call anthropogenic foods or human-provided food sources. So your chickens, your compost, your garden, your garbage, and your beehives. Again, bears learn and remember where they found food. They can easily develop associations between human use areas and opportunities for food sources. Hi, welcome in. And so I just want to really drive home that the availability of these resources is what is the main driver of human-bear conflicts. Bears are just doing their natural behavior. They are food seeking by nature. They are just trying to prepare themselves for that winter season. And it's us who have the responsibility to make sure that we're not drawing them in with these food sources and creating these opportunities for conflict. And that conflict has really high stakes. You've probably heard the phrase, a fed bear is a dead bear. Most bears who make a habit of consuming human-provided foods typically end up being killed either by homeowners or by wildlife managers. Property damage can be quite extensive and expensive for individuals and for communities. And there is a human safety component that we do have to consider when we think about really food conditioned and very habituated bears regularly being around in the community, higher risk of interactions with people, higher risk of those interactions becoming negative. So we want to protect our bears and we want to protect our communities. And so we want to use some tools that will protect our attractants from bears. So up at this top corner, that's an electric fence around a chicken coop, and I'm going to talk in a lot of detail about all of those parts, but I just want to touch briefly on these other resources. So there in the middle is a bear-resistant container from Bear Vault. That's something that you would take camping or backpacking. You can put your food and your toiletries in that and keep it separate from your tent and your cooking supplies. This next picture is a trained wildlife canine. There's an organization in Alaska called Wind River Bear Institute that works with communities to help them identify what are potential sources of conflict and how to resolve those conflicts, how to prevent those conflicts. And they use these trained wildlife canines to actually shepherd bears away from human use areas. So they're a really interesting and really cool resource here. And then down here on the bottom, we have electrified mats. So this larger one is to be used in conjunction with an electric fence, and it's in place of the gate. So if you have an area, usually cattle ranches use this, but it also has applications in landfill sites, large community compost areas. If you have anywhere where you need to be regularly accessing the interior, driving a car, an ATV through, you can put an electrified mat down, and then that electric barrier is maintained when the gate is open, but a bear couldn't cross that, but you still can. Down here in the bottom opposite corner is another electric mat, but a smaller one. It can be used on its own, and that's meant for use in front of doors, underneath windows, to prevent bears from getting entry into a home or to a shed. And then, of course, here in the middle, we have a bear-resistant garbage can, which is another really useful tool for preventing bears from getting into your trash. And this photo comes from Hanes, and as you can see by the really big bear prints on it, a bear has already tried to get into this can, and fortunately, the can did its job, and it was unsuccessful. And I have been told that the hardware store here in Skagway has bear-resistant garbage cans for sale. So they are a more expensive product. I believe they're about $306 to $314 usually. So they are more expensive, but I do think that they are worth it if you're able to make that purchase. Yeah. As long as you're wearing shoes. Yeah, not barefoot, but yes on shoes. All right. So let's dive into electric fences. So our electric fence incentive program is designed to facilitate the proactive use of electric fencing. We really encourage people to put these up before they've ever had any conflicts with a bear. Of course, you're still eligible for the program, even if you have. And we want to improve the accessibility by offering this 50% reimbursement. So participants get half of what they paid reimbursed to them with a maximum amount of $500 per project. And per project, the project is basically a complete fence. Some people have larger properties, they need to build multiple fences. In that case, we would probably raise that reimbursement amount a little bit. But any resident or property owner in Anchorage, Kodiak, on the Kenai Peninsula, and then here in Southeast Alaska is automatically eligible for the program. This includes businesses, nonprofits, tribes, really anyone is eligible. Even if you didn't live here, but you're planning to recreate here, you'd be eligible for reimbursement for a portable fence. We've reimbursed hunters for backpacking fences before. And so to apply, you just need to call or email Defenders, and I will have that number up on the screen in a few. But that is the purpose of our program. And we just ask that everyone calls or emails before they buy anything and before they submit any reimbursement documents, because we want to make sure that you're familiar with our program requirements before you buy anything. And those requirements are right here. So we do have an Energizer strength requirement. The minimum joule output required to effectively deter bears is between 0.5 and 0.7 joules. So we require Energizer to have at least a 0.7 joule output. All fences have to be at least 4 to 5 feet tall, and you need to have at least 5 strands of horizontal wiring. We don't require the use of any specific brand of wire or material, just that you have 5 strands. Now, if you're looking to use a netting style fence, I do have some very specific product recommendations for that, because some of the netting fences are actually too short. So I can send you which ones actually meet the height requirements. But all of our requirements come from this document from Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Deterring Bears with Electric Fencing. And this document I actually send to you in full when you contact me about the program. This is one of the pieces of information that everyone who takes part in the program receives. So again, recommend that you reach out before you buy anything, before you build your fence, so I can talk about these requirements with you, and also discuss whether or not your fence needs an adjustment to these requirements. So if you're fencing in a much larger area, that joule output requirement might change to like a 1 joule output requirement or a 2 joule output requirement. If your electric fence is if you're doing a ground return system, which is alternating hot and grounded wires, we actually require those fences to have 7 wires so that you still have 5 hot wires. Or sorry, 4 hot wires and then 3 grounded wires. So another reason why you would want to make sure you're reaching out before you buy anything, so that you don't have to go back after you've already submitted everything and change aspects of your fence and potentially purchase new materials. And so again, this is our email and our PO box for submitting reimbursement documents. And you can also see there our phone number. The reimbursement process is fairly simple. Once you've built your fence, you will send me a W-9, copies of your receipts, this incentive form that you see on the page and is also on the brochure in front of you, and then 3 to 5 photos of your fence. And the photos are just kind of a check to make sure, A, yes, you built a fence, and B, they allow me to troubleshoot a little bit, and I can kind of identify if anything on your fence looks off, if it looks like a connection hasn't been done properly. So it's just a little bit of an added assurance there. The W-9 I will send to you when you reach out, and I will also send you a digital copy of this incentive form. Does anyone have any questions about the program before I move on to the drier part of the presentation, which is just all about electric fences? All right. So I'm going to go over just the really basic parts of an electric fence. There are some more kind of specific parts that go into this, you know, what you use to connect wires to one another and what you use to connect a grounding rod to the Energizer and all of that. But these are the basic parts. And all of these categories can be found in this brochure that you also have. So you have kind of a little copy of this with you already. But talk about energizer, grounding rods, posts, wires, insulators, the gate, and voltage testers. So just to start off, when you're building an electric fence, you are creating an incomplete circuit, which has been completed when the animal comes up and touches the fence. So when nothing is touching the fence, you just have that electricity being sent off in pulses through your wires, and it just stays there. When an animal touches the fence, that current flows through them into the soil, and then through the soil, it makes its way back to the energizer through the grounding rod and the wiring connecting the grounding rod to the ground terminal of your energizer. And it's that completion of the circuit that actually allows the animal to experience a shock. So if any part of this is broken down, that's going to impact what the animal feels and whether or not you're going to be able to effectively deter that animal. So you have 3 different types of energizers. You have an AC plug-in, solar recharging, and battery powered. AC plug-in is going to be the most reliable power source in the sense that you just plug it into a wall and then you're good to go. But of course, if you have an off-grid site, if you're not connected to the power grid, that's not really an option. And so that's where you want to look into battery or solar recharging. So for battery and solar, the energizer, you just purchase the energizer and it doesn't come with a battery. Solar will usually come with a solar panel. The battery for both of these need to be purchased separately. For battery-powered energizers, I recommend buying 2 batteries, one that is with your energizer and one that you just keep fully charged so that when that other battery dies, you can quickly switch them and you don't have any downtime when your fence isn't on while you're waiting for a battery to recharge. For solar, Yes, and so the energizer will actually say what kind of battery it's compatible with, so it'll have voltage and wattage requirements. That's a good question. Solar, you buy the energizer, it already has a built-in solar panel. Battery, again, sold separately. It will tell you the voltage that you need to have in that battery. And the solar panel will recharge your battery as it's depleted. And I will also add that you can attach a solar panel to a battery-powered fence. So if you're not sure if you get enough sunlight and you're worried about that recharging aspect, and then you install it and you discover, hey, I actually think I think I could use a solar recharging option here, you can buy a solar panel and hook it up to that same system. You just need to make sure that your solar panel is large enough to actually contribute the watts required to recharge that battery. So you'll have to look into that. And that is not something that I am super experienced with, but I do know that there are some great videos online that can help you with that. Unfortunately, I have yet to become an electrician doing this job, but I'm somewhere on my way, I think. So for wire, you want to imagine you're kind of trying to decide if you're doing a permanent or a temporary fence. So for permanent fencing, this is one that's going to be outside in the elements year-round. Whether or not you are turning it on in the winter, it still kind of has to withstand the weather and the snows. And so for that reason, we recommend 14-gauge galvanized steel or aluminum wiring. This metal wiring isn't really going to degrade. It's a lot hardier. It's a little bit harder to work with on the installation, but it is going to last you a lot longer. Temporary wire, you can use poly wire or poly tape. So this is strands of aluminum braided with polyethylene, like plastic. For poly wire, you want to look at 9-stranded poly wire. So 9 strands of aluminum. It's going to be a little bit more conductive. These are great for temporary setups. So if you want to put something up seasonally and then take it down, this is a better bet. If you're doing something like pasture rotation, or if you've got chickens and you move them to a different part of your yard every day, then I might look into electrified netting. And again, I've got kind of specific product recommendations for that one. But yeah, if you've got something that's more temporary, poly wire or a poly tape, and if you have something more permanent, 14-gauge steel or aluminum wiring is what you're looking for. It's on the same fence. Oh, we might want to talk about that. So anytime you're building a fence, you definitely want to make sure that you have like a complete square. So you don't want to leave any open parts. Oh, I see. Just that one part taking it down. Interesting. Could that one part be used as a gate? Or can you not enter? Too big? Okay. Hmm. Give me a minute to think about that. Yeah. Any more questions about wire before I move on? You could. Yeah. Yeah, basically. Because of that polyethylene is going to break down over time. It's a little bit flimsier too. It might break sooner, but we won't not reimburse you for using. Sorry, my computer is picking up my own audio. What's happening? Did that work? Oh,
Shoot.
did this turn on again? It was working so well.
Shoot.
Okay. Wait. Oh, it just
Ah,
decided to do that. Okay.
That'll work.
Sorry about that. Yeah, you can absolutely use polywire on a permanent fence setup. It's just you would expect that to degrade sooner than the galvanized steel. So it might break on one end and you would have to just splice that back together or replace that segment maybe. Yeah. But you can definitely do it, and I do know people that use the polywire for permanent setups. Wow, it really wants to be on. Wow, okay. No, it's determined that it will hear me. Okay. All right, so moving on from wire. Next is posts. So you have different options. You can use wood posts, metal T-posts, or fiberglass posts. Fiberglass posts are going to be a little bit flimsier, and I will say that some people have told me about getting fiberglass splinters when they were trying to install their fence. So that's just something to be aware of. But one of the benefits is that they come with insulators built in. So that is a purchase that you don't have to make then. But you do just want to make sure this is going to be at least 4 feet tall. I know a lot of the fiberglass posts that you see are only like 3 feet tall. So just be careful of that. Metal T-posts are one of my favorite. They're usually pretty widely available at hardware stores. You can buy the 6-foot ones that you just drive into the ground. And then because they're 6 feet, you're usually pretty much guaranteed to meet that 4-foot minimum. And then you start sitting more at like 5 feet, which I personally recommend. I think that's a little bit more of an ideal height, a little bit above the minimum. Then the other option is wood posts. These are especially ideal for corner posts. So metal T-posts and fiberglass posts, you're going to want to brace them at the corners because the tension in the wire is going to start to pull those ends inwards. You can set up wood posts on the corners instead just to provide some extra security there. But both the wood posts and the T-posts are great for permanent and for temporary fencing. Something to be aware with wood posts, especially here in Southeast Alaska, wetter climate, even with treated wood, wood will start to rot and degrade eventually. So that's just something kind of long term that you'll want to be aware of and just make sure you're keeping an eye on it. And again, for our program, we don't have specific material or brand requirements. So it really is all up to you on that front. All right, so for your grounding rod, other than the Energizer, this might be the most important part of your fence. Your fence is not going to function well if you don't have enough ground. The animal is not going to receive a strong enough shock to be deterred. So grounding rod's usually a 1/2 inch in diameter and made of galvanized steel. you want at least 3 to 6 feet of rod per output joule, or sorry, per joule of stored energy. You always have more stored joules than output joules on your Energizer, so just make sure that you look at the packaging. That's also important if you're looking for the output. If you have something that says 0.7 stored joules, that output is actually going to be below 0.7, and it's not going to meet our program minimums. So just something to keep in mind. And if you're ever unsure if your Energizer has the required amount of output joules, you can send me the model information and I will double check it for you. Yes. Yes, that's the 0.7 joule output. Yes. Could be like 1 joule stored, 1.2 joule stored. Mm-hmm. And you can never have too much ground. So if you're wondering if you should go with a 3 foot or a 6 foot, just go for a 6 foot. Yeah. And that's a great point because you don't actually need to use an entire like 1 6 foot rod. You can actually get 2 3 foot and then connect those to each other. Yeah, because I know very few people who actually have the ground that would allow them to put in a 6 foot rod like that. But yeah, you can connect multiple 3 foot rods. And if you need to cut it down even more, you could probably do multiple 2 foot rods. But it's just that the accumulative grounding rod is at least 6 feet per joule of stored energy. And if you do have multiple rods, you will have to space them a certain distance apart. I can't remember off the top of my head how far that is, but I believe that it is in that electric fencing guide that I send. And let's see, one more note about grounding rods. It's considered best practice to not mix metals. So if you're using polywire, which has aluminum wiring, or you're using galvanized steel or aluminum wiring, I would not recommend using like a copper grounding rod. I can't say exactly why that is, but the people who taught me about electric fencing within Defenders have said it's just recommended that you don't mix metals. So I pass that on to you. I think anything else? Don't use rebar for grounding rod. It's usually not as conductive as the galvanized steel or the aluminum. So I would avoid using rebar, and oftentimes rebar can rust as well, and you don't want that. Polywire is usually aluminum. It's thinner and more flexible. No, you can use galvanized steel. So galvanized steel is also good for aluminum. Those two play well together. And I guess one back note for aluminum wiring is that it is a bit more flexible to work with if you're using that for a permanent fence. So some people will choose that over the galvanized steel, which is super stiff. The caveat to that is that if you bend it enough times, it will break. So if you do choose the aluminum, just be aware of how many times you're bending it so that you don't break it a lot. Grounding rod, okay. Insulators. So this is going to prevent your wires from leaking electricity and grounding out your fence. You want everything contained in your wires. They make a lot of different types of insulators, a lot of different shapes to meet your needs. You have options of plastic or ceramic. Most of the ceramic ones are screw-in types, so you would use those with wood posts, but the metal T-posts have a lot of compatible energizers. So this yellow one here, that clips on to that T-post that you see here. They also make extended insulators. So these are great for around corners. You don't want that wire to bend back and touch that metal post. These kind of extended ones, they make a screw-in design. So that photo that I showed a couple slides back of that chicken coop, if you have like a wooden coop like this, you can build your electric fence directly onto that coop. So they've used kind of offset insulators to put wires in the coop like that. So you can do that. If you have existing fences, existing structures, you can retrofit those to be electrified. They make insulators that clip on to chain link. So you don't have to start from scratch. If you have any kind of existing fence infrastructure, we can talk about finding the right insulator that will allow you to adapt that to an electrified fence. And then last, and also a very important piece, is your voltage meter. So this measures the output voltage running through your wires. Now there's a little bit of a difference between a reader and a meter. So a voltage reader will tell you if there's current passing through the wire, which is great information to know. But in addition to having an energizer that produces 0.7 or greater output joules, you're also looking for a voltage along the wires. So what you want is about 7,000 volts coming from a 0.7 joule output energizer. And so you can think of volts like RPMs and joules like horsepower. And so like a little car can carry a trailer, but it can't move very fast, can't make it up hills very well, versus a car with a really big engine can handle that trailer. You can go really fast, you can go up all the hills and everything. So having a stronger energizer producing that 7,000 volts allows that current to push through more resistance. So travel further along the fence line and especially travel through like the thick fur, thick skin of something like a bear. So you want to make sure that your wires have 7,000 volts running along them. And so that's why you would like a meter so you know what that number is. And they usually look about like this. They make some really fancy ones. There's like a fault finder brand that can tell you exactly where on your fence line there's an issue in your fence. This is a very basic one. You put that metal end into the ground, you clip that hook onto your fence slider, and then one of those numbers lights up, and that's how much voltage you have. These are great for understanding not only do you have the right amount of voltage, but they can help you figure out if there's ever a problem in your fence. So if one day you're reading 7,000 volts and then next week you're reading 2,000, now you know there's a major issue, and it could be between the connection in from your wire to your energizer, or it could be an issue with your ground. But this is a really essential piece for maintenance and upkeep of your fence. Okay. Now I want to talk about gates, which can be kind of the most complex part of a fence. There's a lot of ways to build a gate. The simplest version is what you see here, which are just a couple handles. They hook in to one side of your fence. The downside of this kind of gate is that anytime you want to get inside your area, you have to turn off your energizer because these wires can't be on while the gate handle just sort of like dangles and touches the ground. It's going to maybe short out your fence. So have to turn it off. And then when you leave, you have to turn it back on. And most electric fence failures actually happen because the fence was never on in the first place. And I've heard stories even from people that we've reimbursed of the electric fence failing because someone had to go in to do something within the fence area and they turned off the energizer, but then they forgot to turn it back on. And so a bear got into the chickens or something like that. So that is the one downside of this, even though this is the simplest and it is also the cheapest option. If you are worried about that problem, or you want something that you're just kind of able to open up and not really think about it, you can use this kind of design. So what you see here is, I'll walk around now. So you've got your fence line, you have your wires, and then on your gate, you've also put wires, and you have jumped the connection from your fence line to your gate. So now your gate is its own electrified piece. So on the gate, only these wires are hot. Ideally, you would have more wires than this, but for the sake of the drawing, there are fewer. But here you can open this gate. You don't have to turn anything off. These wires allow this gate to hinge open like that, and you can enter and shut it behind you. And so this can remain on while you use it. You don't have any breaks in your barrier, and it works really well. And so that picture to the left is that exact design, just with a cattle gate. So they've attached wooden posts and run wires across that. And this photo is a close-up of what's happening around that hinge. So you have this insulated wire that is connecting the hot wire that you see there, going around the hinge, and then it's connected to the wire on the gate. And so that kind of wraps up everything that I have about electric fences. The next portion of this will be, if you guys are interested, going out with this backpacking fence I have and kind of setting it up outside and getting some practice with connecting an energizer to the wires, to the grounding rod, and all of that. But before we do that, just want to show you again. So this is our email, alaskadefenders@defenders.org, our main office number as well as my office number, any of those numbers or that email is a great option for contacting me to take part in the program. And then that PO box is another option if you would prefer to send your reimbursement documents through the mail versus sending them to me via email. If you do send something through the PO box, I would just ask that you let me know. I travel a lot during the summer, so I'll just want to be extra aware that something might be coming to me, and I'll make sure to check it while I'm in town. But before we go outside, does anyone have any questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, if you put it on the inside, it's not going to help you a lot. So you'll want it to be on the outside. If you are worried about someone like bumping into it, they make these little warning electric fence signs. And I will also add that modern electric fences are built to be non-injurious, non-harmful to people. So they're high voltage, low amperage, and amperage is the component that's actually harmful. So because this is being released in pulses, it doesn't have like a consistent hot wire, they're low fire risk, they're not going to create that response in someone that causes their muscles to lock up where they can't let go of the fence. It actually has kind of the opposite effect. You're kind of forced to release it. So they are by and large considered safe. I do always recommend that people kind of avoid letting children touch electric fences, and that if you have like a pacemaker or anything like that, that you exercise caution, wear rubber boots when you're installing it, all that good stuff. But generally, they are considered to be pretty safe for people and for wildlife. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. And are you interested in doing the outside component? All right, let's do it. I will stop my share. Turn off my camera. Okay, so I might give you guys some parts to help me carry out. So here, I'll give you an energizer in this fun little collection. So how far will they... So they will have different mileage ratings on them. And so one of the key pieces of planning out your electric fence will be kind of first measuring the area that you're trying to fence. So you'll measure that, and let's say you're fencing in 50 feet. You're going to multiply that by 5 for the 5 strands of wiring. And then that is the distance that you're looking for the energizer to cover. And so when you're looking at energizers, they'll say like covers a quarter mile, half mile, 50 miles, and you just want to make sure that you get one that corresponds with the distance. It's totally fine if it covers over that distance. You just don't want it to cover under that distance. Okay. Yes. All right, so these little backpacking fences are great. They're a good option if you just want extra protection when you're camping, fishing, doing anything like that, hunting. I don't recommend them for like standing attractants if you've got a chicken coop, if you've got a garden, something that's attracting bears year round, just because, that energizer that you have is only a 0.02 joule output. It can still create 7,000 volts, but you don't have that same power behind it as you would with the 0.7 joule energizer. So just to note, but I think that this can give you a good idea of a general idea of how all these things come together. So I've kind of set this up to start the line here. You, I believe, have the tops. And so let's see, if you want to take this one and connect it, I'll trade you for a bottom, that one. And we'll just set them up like this. Yes, oh, that's all set, so I should actually give you this. So you'll just want to put that into the ground, really as far as, not too far, about that far. Probably drive this a little bit deeper. And then here, I'll give you this one. I'm missing one. Be right back. Is it out there? Thank you. There we go. This kind of energizer is just connected to a D battery, so it's pretty easy to use. And this comes with wiring, and you just cut it down to what you need. And you'll do the same with the bigger polywire. So this is an example of polywire. This is what it is. And it's pretty easy to work with. You know, it's super flexible, but it definitely, you'll notice there are some frayed ends and edges of this. I've used this a couple times. It's already kind of starting to become a little bit flimsier and break down a little bit. So let's see. That's on the bottom. I'm actually going to attach this to the second one. Yes. Oh, you're okay, yeah. Are you on the top one? Okay, you keep that one on the top one. And I'm gonna put this one on the bottom, or the second one. So we'll thread it all the way around. Perfect. Yes, typically you would have these all start and end in the same spot, but just for the purposes of this, being a little bit lax with it. So I don't have you guys out here forever. I tried to cut these wires down to a good height, but I definitely don't have them long enough to go all the way around. Well, we made it a little bit bigger than my pre-cut wires, but I think this will still give you the idea. There we go. And so, you know, barring that missing line there, this is essentially what it looks like when you've got it set up. Now, to attach your energizer. So for this little fence, the way that it's meant to work is that this part is electrified and it just hangs on your fence wire. Now for the energizer that you'll be using on a permanent fence, you would have this either hooked up to a battery or attached, plugged into the wall. And so in that case, you would take your insulated wiring. This is using an alligator clamp. For your electric fence, you would use insulated underground wire rated to 20,000 volts, and you would attach it to the hot terminal of your energizer, and then you would attach that to your wire. Then you would take a second insulated wire, and you would attach it to that hot wire, and then you would jump that connection to the next wire that you want to be hot. And so now both of these wires are hot. This clamp would go to your grounding rod, and let me get that out. All right, so this didn't come with the fence. The first time I set this up, I realized I needed more ground, so I went out to the hardware store and I got a bigger rod. And so in an ideal world, I would drive this way further into the ground, but I don't want to keep you out here forever. And so with this system, the ground terminal is inside of the energizer, and so this clamp just goes right on like that. And because I'm doing an all hot system, I would attach this back, or sorry, not that. If I'm doing an all hot system, I would keep this connection the same. If I want to do alternating hot and grounded wires, so I wanted, let's say this is actually connected to the middle wire, I want the bottom ones to be grounded. In that case, I would connect it back to the ground like that.
Means the ground one is not hot?
Not hot, yes. So the advantage of that is, let's say I'm camping and I actually had to do this. You're on a beach. I can't drive this down very far. There's a lot of rocks. I know the soil is not going to be very conductive. So now I'm worried about actually having this circuit be complete. So what I can do here instead, this wire is hot, this wire is hot, this one is ground maybe. Now to receive a shock, if the bear touches this hot wire and this grounded wire with its face, that's completing the circuit.
Instead of the ground to the wire.
Instead of the ground to the wire, yeah. Clip it right back on there. Yeah, and so now you are less reliant on the grounding rod. And for extra security, I might get just like another connector and attach this back to the Energizer as well, because you can never have too much ground. But if you really can't use a grounding rod, if you're ever in that kind of situation, doing the alternating hot and ground is a good way to go. Yeah. And for that system, what I would say would be best is actually to have this middle wire as the ground wire. Keep your top wire and your bottom wire hot. This is going to be more eye level to the bear. This is going to help prevent digging. And then that middle wire would be grounded so that if they come low, they'll hit both those wires, complete the circuit. And if they go high, they hit both those wires and complete the circuit. Connected to the ground terminal of the Energizer. Yeah. Yes. And so that's kind of the gist of it. I hope that wasn't too confusing because I know that this is a little bit different from a permanent fence setup. But yeah, do you have any questions? Yeah. Do you want to play around with doing the connections with this, clipping the hot versus the ground? Yeah. Yeah, and I'm happy to take calls, do FaceTimes, help with the planning, all that stuff. You can send me pictures of what you have, and I can see if there's any specific insulators that I would recommend and things like that. Yeah. All right.
You do site visits as well?
I do, yeah, and I am here until Monday morning, so I'm not in town for a super long time, but while I am here, I'm happy to come out. Yeah. And then I think trying to plan to be back here in July. So if you're trying to build sooner, then I can come out while I'm in town this time. But if you're not building till later, I can.
Building's up and the birds are in it. I just got to get the fence up.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'll see if I can come out while I'm in town. I don't know what you're doing tomorrow, but
I'm available tomorrow.
okay. Yeah, same.
Okay.
All right.
Fine.
Sounds good. Yeah, I've got my card inside so we can exchange numbers.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.